The first lens we're going to look at is the feminist critique, then gender and sexuality. Just to clarify, these three have separate criticisms or explanations, but they're often intertwined because of how it discusses gender roles, norms, and structures set in place that serve the male demographic. So what is feminist criticism? Feminist criticism is a mode of literary and cultural discussion and reassessment inspired by modern feminist thought, an arena of debate about the relations in between literature and the social cultural subordination borne by women as writers, readers, or fictional characters within a male-dominated patriarchal social order. So what does this all mean? This lens allows us to critique the way society views or treats women, hence the debate on how women are treated or represented as writers, readers, or characters, and how they are portrayed in male-dominated spaces. Like in the last unit, we discussed romanticism. Many classic examples of romanticism, like Romeo and Juliet, allow us to use this feminist criticism to think about how did Shakespeare represent Juliet? Was Juliet a strong, independent woman or a damsel in distress? Well, according to the reader response lens, it could be both, depending on the question being asked. So when we look through a feminist lens, does the hypothesis of a female reader change our apprehension of a given text, awakening us to the significance of its sexual codes? In other words, does the male or female perspective alter our understanding of the content, movies, TV series, music, social media that we consume, and why? Over on Nearpod, share your thoughts on the Collaborate board. Do you think that the male or female perspective alter our understanding of content we consume? Why or why not? Once you submit a response, head over to the next slide to continue learning about feminism, gender, and sexuality. According to film theorists, they have hypothesized that this lens sees society as patriarchal, that the odds are stacked against women, while men hold a majority of the power. Women lack representation in media, government, and other institutions. If they are represented, they are in minor or negative ways. According to the reader response lens, literary texts and traditions of their interpretation seem to have presumed a male point of view. In the same way that this camera is positioned on Janae Aiko, she is the center object of this interview. The example given is that film theorists have hypothesized that what they call the cinematic gaze, the view from which the position of the camera, is essentially male, where women are positioned as the object of the cinematic gaze rather than the observer. Or how in anime, like many shows, where they clearly position or animate scenes of women or female characters to be the object rather than the observer. So how does objectivity and positioning connect to gender roles? Well, let's turn to Judith Butler, an American philosopher who has had a heavy influence on the notion and emergence of the idea that gender and sexuality is performative. If you ever take a literary course on gender and sexuality, or even explore identity as a topic in college, you'll surely come across Judith Butler in higher education. So what does it mean for something to be performative? According to the Oxford Dictionary definition, Judith Butler argued that a person's gender is continually and variably performed rather than as a given fact. So if gender is something that is performed, then what is queer theory? Queer theory stresses the historical variability, fluidity, and provisional of the performed nature of sexualities. With feminism, gender, and sexuality, we consider gender as performative in the sense that it is not what one is, but what one does. A gender is created by your acts, in the same way that a promise is created by the act of promising. You become a man or a woman by repeated social conventions, habits of culture. There are socially established ways of being a man or a woman. So by our understanding of queer theory, this fluidity between gender and sexuality is a performance. Therefore, feminism, gender, sexuality criticism suggests that gender is a social construct created by society, not by nature. Also explores expectations upon men to be dominant, aggressive, unemotional, toxic, analysis of how gender affects our daily lives and the opportunities that are available to us based on our gender. Some questions a reader may ask when using this lens to analyze a text. What possibilities or opportunities are available for women in the story? For LGBTQI people in the story? For men in the story? How are women portrayed? How are they expected to act? How are LGBTQI people portrayed? How are men portrayed and how are they expected to act? How do cis men maintain their power? And are women or members of the LGBTQI community able to gain power? Up next, we're going to look at two examples of fluidity and performative nature of gender and sexuality through Adventure Time, and specifically through BMO. While you're watching, I want you to think about the following questions. How does BMO's identity portray the feminist gender sexuality lens? How do these examples show gender as a social construct or gender performance? Once you're done watching these two clips on Nearpod, make sure to share and like ideas on the Collaborate board. And if you haven't already, make sure to finish the reading in the next slide or wherever you access this lesson's reading on feminism, gender, and sexuality, and respond to the Google Classroom discussion question. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.